through the meditation you led, I could like just like the very like first piece of it, I was already like in Puerto Viejo in Costa Rica. And I start feeling all warm and like just fuzzy and high vibe and just
Yeah, reconnected again.
uh-huh.
Yeah, same here. Same here. I was right there on the beach
Yeah.
and felt the beautiful land. Okay, so hi everyone. We're back at the Blueray Collective. This is Coco and I am Moon, and we both have started and initiated the Blueray Collective, and we have had some previous podcasts we have led, but this one is a little different than the previous ones because we just traveled to Costa Rica. I was there for a month, and Coco came for the last week of it, and we spent an amazing time together in Puerto Viejo. And we would love to share with you some of our experiences and the realizations that we had over there.
Yeah. This is like the fourth time that I've been back to Costa Rica. And I always go to a different location and it never fails to disappoint me as far as the energy and what I get to experience. I think we both personally have some like astrology lines that pass through that area. So maybe for us it's significantly like transformational. But also Costa Rica is just such a hotspot right now for people moving there, expats living from all over the world. And there's just so many special things about the country and the land itself. So
Yeah,
I'm excited to dive into that.
for sure, for sure. I mean, for me, it was my first time. I've been called to go there already over 15 years, probably. And I never heeded the call until now, which was absolutely necessary and beautiful. And as a matter of fact, I mean, it was actually Cornelia when I first met her, maybe how long ago? Almost 3 years ago.
Yeah, something
Is
like
that
that.
possible?
Two, I think two. Two?
Two?
I think, yeah, I think we met in 2021.
2021. Okay.
Right when I was like trying to move to Costa Rica.
So we met right before she wanted to move to Costa Rica. So she put a bug in my head. I was like, oh my God, I really want to go to Costa Rica because she talked, oh, you talked so intensely how beautiful the place is and how much it calls you and how special it is and so on. And yeah, I ended up having a hypnosis session with another regressionist, Jackie, who was on our podcast before, and a Syrian collective called La Otras or Las Otras came through and told me that I have to be in Costa Rica for 2 weeks in May to experience a second homecoming, like a way of reconnecting with myself and with the land, and learn plant medicine over there. So I heeded the call, and with the help of Cornelia, I was able to go over there and had an absolute most amazing time. It really, really was transformative and a very, very beautiful experience.
Yeah, yeah. I'm so glad you got to go. And it's interesting because I almost feel like it came through in one of our sessions too, but I had this innate knowing like you had to go because right before you told me, I was like, I need to ask her, is she going to Costa Rica in May? Like I had this innate knowing like you had to be in Costa Rica in May too.
And
So
it
yeah.
was really, really important. And when I did decide to actually go and commit to it for a month, I also had an innate feeling that Cornelia was gonna come.
I couldn't miss the opportunity. Like if someone tells me to go to Costa Rica, like I have to go. There's no, and especially you know.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, okay, hopefully she's gonna come for the second part of my time over there. And as soon as I landed in Puerto Viejo, which was the second part of my trip, I get a text message from her saying, "I'm coming to Costa
Yeah.
Rica." Yeah, so it worked out really nice because we ended up being able to experience quite a bit of uh, interesting aspects of Costa Rica together. And it wasn't all perfect and sunshine and beautiful as the country most of the time is. We also get to see the different aspect, the shadow side of Costa Rica, or like even the spiritual side of Costa Rica. And as challenging it was in the moment, it was also extremely informative and important to be able to see that and not close our eyes towards it and just be like, okay, this is heaven on earth and that's it. Like,
Yeah.
it's a place on earth and we're gonna have the yin and yang, and we got to experience both sides, and it actually made the trip much more wholesome and rounded up. So we would like to share with you what we have encountered over there.
Yeah. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, I think I think it would be nice to start with Nosara because this is the first part of my trip, and you've been to Nosara and spent an entire month over there, right?
Mhm.
And you told me to go over there. You even told me to go which place to stay at and stuff like that, which turned out to be amazing.
Yeah.
And maybe we can delve into the energies, how Nosara is like.
Yeah.
You want to get started with your experiences over there?
Yeah. So I spent about a month there. What was it? Like coming close to 2 years ago. I think Nosara has changed over the time. It used to be like the place where everyone was moving because it's on the Pacific side and it's got beautiful beaches, sunsets, and I think a lot of the community was there at the time. And this is where we go with the yin and yang aspect. There is a lot of material out there on the internet, along with just like word of mouth that has passed down, that there is a lot of expats that are moving that aren't necessarily respecting the land as the way that it was. And there's issues with water for locals in that area. I think it's due to there not being enough of it because I don't exactly know the scientific aspects of all of this, but I know that it's a huge issue, and there has been people that lived there and wanted to move out to different parts of Costa Rica to get a little bit more of the raw experience. Where in the Sahara, it's a lot of expats, it's a little bit more high end. It's still amazingly beautiful. Like the sunsets there are awesome. But it's not as much of the raw Costa Rican culture there. It's more so in my experience with the place.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Yeah, for me, it was really, really beautiful. Nosara is actually in the blue zone, and the blue zone is that all I know is that the blue zone is really, really good with the water. So the people, the natives who lived over there can turn up to 125 years. It's known that people in the area are very, very healthy. It's uh, because of the water and the energy of the land. And for me, it was mind blowing to go there, like immediately coming from Los Angeles, is because the energy of the land was so charged, and I didn't realize how important it is to live on sacred land, to be able to put our bare feet on sacred land, to be able to fully ground and recharge. And that's pretty much what I did. I landed over there and plugged my energy system into the source energy of Nosara, and spent a lot of time, a lot of alone time in the beach, on the beach, with my bare feet on the ground, or I was just sitting in the water, in the ocean. There are these little nooks inside of the stones that were leading into the ocean, and you could sit there like in a basin, and I would sit there with my mouth hard, like, oh, wow, wow, or doing different kind of chantings and vibrations, and working with the ocean. And it was absolutely beautiful because the ocean and the air is always in constantly air temperature, like not air temperature, it's called body temperature. So I didn't feel any kind of cold, any type of like temperature fluctuations. The sun has a very specific way of of shining at that area of the world. Like it's so close to the equator, and it has a very specific kind of softness, a specific kind of look almost, that the ocean and the sky look phenomenally beautiful. And that's where I think the sun, what's it called? Sundowns?
Sunsets.
Sunsets, thank you. The sunsets are so unbelievably beautiful. Like it took me a while to actually get to the beach at sundown because I didn't realize how phenomenal it is. Then I got completely and utterly addicted. Like it turned into a date with nature every single day, trying to find a way to get to the beach at sundown and just sit there and be in awe. There would be so many people, locals as well as tourists, and everybody would go there and be like, what actually is happening. I had these crazy moments where like, I don't know if I can even contain the joy that I was experiencing sitting there. Like, excuse me, are you serious? Like, this is actually happening, and this is happening every day in this place. It was unfreaking believable. The pictures I took are like breathtaking and mind blowing, and it's just, I don't know, 10% of what actually was happening. It's like an everyday spectacle that was happening there. It was so beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At the beginning for you too, because that was like the beginning of your trip, and us coming, like Min's in LA, I'm in Austin, Texas, so we're both in very like speedy speedy cities. So the very first instinct, it's like your very first week, well, for me it was a few days, your nervous system needs to like adjust to the land, because our nervous system is like so moving at such a high rate, because that's what we're used to it. So we're like the first days you're slowing down, but you're so supported by the nature because Costa Rica is so untouched. So like the second you land, you're, even the whole city, like I was mesmerizing it on my way out, and like even the city's still sitting in the jungle. Like, you know, you don't get that in many places.
No, you
Yeah.
don't. It's such a special kind of place where people are interacting and living with nature in a way that is so easygoing and comfortable, and time really does slow down, and the pace is much, much slower. Like we would spend the whole day looking for food, and we just stroll around town, and the town is actually in the middle of the jungle. Everything is green, so our heart chakras are always lit up and being charged, and our first, second, third chakras are being charged by the land, and our second chakra is being nourished by the ocean. And we were able to completely change our nervous systems with being so immediately close to nature and eating really good food. Like the difference in food made a huge difference. The difference in food between the United States and Costa Rica were so strong. I mean, if you compare me to the recordings of previous times right now, like Costa Rica, I didn't really lose that much weight, but my body feels so different because I have been just detoxed.
You know, it might be inflammation too, because like the inflammation is lower. You're in so much nature that you're ionized properly.
Yeah, exactly. Grounded and ionized properly, all the organs start like falling into place, and the circadian rhythm changes because we go to sleep earlier and we wake up earlier. We're constantly on the move, we're constantly in the sunshine when we're charging our chakras, we're constantly barefoot. Like all these kind of things make such a big difference, and we completely lose sight of that living in the city, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I felt that very first few days too. It's just like, I'm like, wow, like so recharged. And I only was there for 10 days or 9 days,
Yeah.
but it makes a huge difference.
Huge difference. Like I saw every single day how I shifted, and I've been there for an entire month, which I'm really happy and lucky about, because I feel like the changes and shifts were not just temporary in the sense. I was able to really charge up, and I'm gonna try to get back as soon as possible. And I feel like we almost need Costa Rica once or twice a year.
Yeah, 100%. Like it literally is like a huge, it's like a battery. It
Yeah.
recharges. The longer you are, the more it can recharge. And like I said, the 4 times that I was in, or the past 3 times, like I had made like right coming back the following weeks were most life-changing weeks of my entire life. Like I decided to leave California. I had, or actually the first time triggered my awakening, the very first time I went, like one of my like major awakenings of my life internally. Like it literally, that was my pivotal changing moment of my life. And I had no idea going into it. I just went in because there were some people going to Costa Rica and I was like, I'll tag along. And then I just like my whole life changed. I changed. Like I know it was a trigger. Second time I decided to move from Costa Rica or move out of California. Third time was another transformational moment. So like I think if you even consciously try to connect to the land, like it can really have personal shifts, I think, you know.
I think so too. And the great thing about Costa Rica is also all these different kind of ecotourism and eco lodges that they're doing over there. You know,
Yes.
like the way how people are handling tourism, the way how they are dealing with trash, even, you know, the way how they interact with nature and make it such an asset, even from like an economic standpoint, you know, and learning how to live with nature and make the most of nature and being able to create wellness and recovery centers in a way that is sustainable is so beautiful to see, you know, and being part of that, seeing how it's done, how it's working out, all the different retreats. You know, there's so many people around the world that do incredible healing work and wellness work that go to Costa Rica to do wellness retreats and stuff like that, which is number one, incredibly motivating for us because that's where we want to get to. And also being able to see how it's done over there. There's this huge experimentation going on with all these different communities that are working together and finding ways to live off the land and learning permaculture and learning different healing modalities and stuff like that, and taking these concepts that are being worked out in Costa Rica and finding ways to transplant them in different places, but adjusted to that land, that place, and creating these beautiful, beautiful 5D centered, energetic, high vibe communities is incredibly fascinating and inspiring.
Yeah. I hope I personally didn't get to go to any this time around, but I have visited before and I plan to going forward with that intention. But yeah, I know some people building some amazing projects out there. And I honestly don't really see it being built many places. I mean, maybe Mexico, there's some going on too, but Costa Rica is like the hotspot for it. And I think it is due to the charge of the land
Yeah. And
over there.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's called Costa Rica for a reason. You know, it's a really, really rich coast. It has one of the highest densities of a variety of animals and plants. Like the flora and the fauna is extremely diverse,
Yeah.
and just the kind of climate conditions that this little country has, you know, and the amount of things that is there to see. I mean, I've seen just only two different cities and two different coasts and two
Yeah.
little areas, but these are tiny, tiny in comparison to what else this land has to offer,
Yeah.
you know? So
Yeah.
what are you gonna say?
I try I the way I like to call it it's just so fertile and in what it has to offer. And it's on the aspect of like materialistic aspect, there is nothing, but it's the aspect of the energy there and that rich nature. And I always feel just so safe there, even though it's a foreign country. And yeah, I mean, there's still certain internal programming that goes into it where I don't fully feel safe because it is a foreign country and I'm an expat coming in, but the nature makes me feel safe and held. And no matter what I'm moving through, like it's like a friend. It's like it feels like a family, you know, like a soul. And I don't feel that. I haven't felt that in many places in the world when it comes to nature. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, speaking of friend, I think the ocean literally became my best friend when I was
Yeah,
there.
you and the ocean, yeah.
I fell in love with the ocean so hard. I mean, I live in Venice Beach, so I'm very
Right.
close to the ocean, and I've always loved living on the Pacific side. But like now, I have a completely different appreciation for the ocean just because the ocean was so warm when I was there, and I was able to just
Yeah.
sit in it, you know. I didn't have to swim, I didn't have to struggle to survive in that sense. I was able to connect with it, and I had some really amazing hypnosis sessions over there. One of which was with a woman in Germany, so she wasn't even near the ocean or anything, but I was able to connect with the archaic primordial ocean before they were animals and humans or anything like that. The earth very fresh, very clean and pristine. And I was talking directly to the consciousness of the ocean, and she told us how to connect with her. She was telling us to put one hand at the heart center and put the other hand into the ocean and consciously connect with her. And after I had that session, I literally went every single day to the ocean in the morning. I would wake up, put on my clothes, and just go to the ocean and do that. And I spent the first few days just crying. I was sitting in the ocean, crying and connecting with the ocean. And that connection was so deep and so moving and so healing to me that I would spend hours sitting there, you know, and there's this moving and crying, connecting with the nature and with connecting with the ocean, but also being able to be held, as you're saying, to be able to move through emotions.
Yeah.
You know, I had carried so much stress and so much pain and so much confusion from being here in California and going through many different transformations and things. You know, Cornelia and I were like on a supercharged journey of healing for ourselves and help others to do the same. And there was a lot up in the surface, you know, and juggling, going to places like that really supercharges the process, and the nature helps the process. And yeah, I sat there every morning, you know, crying for hours, and people would pass by and like asking, how are you doing? Are you okay? And I'm like, I'm fine. I'm perfectly fine. And I gained control in the sense where I can tap into emotions that I've blocked into my stomach, into my not just stomach, but like in my body, being able to cry with the ocean intendedly. Like, you know, you could just tap into it. And then when I was done. And I would wake up like everything was good. You know, it wasn't something where you get overwhelmed by the emotion at times where you have no control. You're doing control in nature where you're like, okay, I'm going to sit down and heal with the ocean, you know, heal with this beach. And that's what I did for like 2 weeks straight. It was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, stomach was such a big theme for both of us in the entire trip. So yeah, there was a lot of purging. I did some emotional purging. I maybe didn't sit every morning with the ocean. I mean, I did sit actually with the ocean, but we had a deep session, Moon and I, that we both exchanged in, and I had a huge emotional release in mine. I think we've been doing sessions online, and the intimacy of being able to be together allowed me to open up a little bit more, to be able to attend to like the deeper layers that have been in me that I can't usually open up. I personally deal with a lot of resistance in being in touch with certain emotions because I've tried to reject them out of my field. I think a lot of us go through this process. So I'm kind of calling those parts that I've rejected back to myself. That's the current time frame that I'm in. So I was able to get in touch with that, and I personally feel much lighter. But I remember during that session we were calling in the jungle, we were calling in the nature, we were calling in the animals around us, and I felt so safe in that little like studio that we were in, which was like in the middle of this incredible garden. And I felt very held and safe to be able to release some of that. So I'm very happy because I do feel much lighter. And I've been working with my sacral for quite some time, maybe like 2-3 years now. And there's a lot that I'm shedding and there was a big piece that I was able to move past. So it makes me really happy.
Yeah, the ocean is so green, right? And the lushness and the fertility of the land and of the plants were so engulfing, you know, it's like a huge hug with nature that we just
Yeah.
all day long. And being able to do sessions over there was so beautiful. Like I remember my session was also incredibly uplifting and inspired by the nature, you know, by being there. And so supercharged is actually really
Creative inspiration. I mean, Moon and I, we were like so creatively inspired. I actually got more inspired to like just regain the spark again, you know? So the beautiful necklaces, we were just super inspired by necklaces the entire time we were there. So
actually we should wear them and
we
our
should have. I mean, I'm wearing one. I'm wearing my tiger eye I got, but we got like very, very sparky ones. Let's just put it that way.
we did really beautiful handmade jewelry by the indigenous living over there. And I mean, I especially had art choosing which one because I love so much and they're so beautiful. I think we should dress up in our sessions and wear them, present them because they were very, very incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, what was I gonna say? I forgot.
Well, then we made it into the jungles and we actually hung out with the indigenous.
Oh, we did.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That was
so
a hell of an experience. Let's just put it that way. We
yeah,
both didn't know what we were getting into, I think. Fully. I had no clue. I was like, we're gonna be like, you know, in a retreat center or some sort. It was not that, but it was extremely eye-opening as to the polarity of the way and the worlds that still exist on this plane. I think being submersed in the city and not fully seeing like the third world, the way people live in a third world still, was pretty shocking to me. And I like to say that I'm like very in tune and aware, but until you're like there and you realize that like people still sleep on the ground and they don't have like full aspect of like what we usually do in our day to day. I'm super empathic. So like the very first 2 hours, I was just kind of sitting there frozen, like I don't know how to process this, like seeing dogs that were, you know, not fed and just the energy of it was pretty hard for me to take in at the very beginning. Yeah.
okay. So just to give a little context, uh, I followed the instruction of discovering the plant medicine over there. And I was looking for different ways. There were all these different fincas where different clans were working with specific plants. And each clan has a complete cultural lineage of working with that particular plant. And there were so many different ones. And I kind of followed my intuition of working with people that I meet on the ground. So when I first arrived over there, I walked in this cute little shed that belonged to the bush doctor. And talked to him. And I told him like I'm looking to learn about plant medicine over there because I mean I'd never even thought about learning plant medicine. Cornelia got into it like months back because it is part of her own ancestral lineage and so on. And I was like, okay, I'm learning already so many things, so many different things. Like I cannot like herbology and plant medicine is this whole thing, you know. It's like full Cornelia is doing that. I don't need to go into that, but the Syrians, the ET were quite compelled to get me to look into that myself. So I followed the urge, and it made total sense to tap into that energy in Costa Rica, just because the energy there, the plants are so diverse, and pretty much every single living plant that is over there has a specific purpose for the human and helps us live. And I learned that I mean everything is vibration, right? We know that everything is vibration, but the way how the plants react to the different energy fields on the earth at different times, where the sun and the moon and all the planets are in different constellations. It creates different kind of plants and different kind of energies. And us learning about these vibrations and interacting with the plants and the consciousness of the plants really changes our energy being, and it activates different parts of our DNA apart from all the healing aspects, and it expands our consciousness in different ways. I mean, we know that about psychedelics, right? So I mean, I've been really, really very much into psychedelics and working with ayahuasca and mushrooms and so on. But I never actually thought that the plants that do not have psychedelic effects would have that much of an impact on me. And connecting with that information and that knowledge over there just blew my mind. Now I'm like all about learning about oregano leaves, You made this tincture of and brought it to me in Costa Rica, and it was so helpful and still very, very helpful to me. And this is the first plant that I'm getting into. But back to the story, going to the bush doctor, I wanted to see how the local bribris or the local shamans would go about their lives, and what they would like to present to us coming over there. And he said, yeah, I'm doing a tour. He's going to do a cacao ceremony, and he's going to show us how things are done, and he does these tours and so on. And I'm like, okay, awesome. Cornelia said she's going to come. I'm going to wait for her. Let's go over there. And I pretty much vetted him every single day because he was on my way to my hostel, and I would stop by every day, talk to him, ask him more questions, and interact with him. And he was really, really nice. And his friend, they were always sitting there. They had all these beautiful plants around. So eventually the day came and Cornelia had just arrived, maybe like 3-4 days, right?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, we were taken by a bus. We were 5-6 people.
Yeah, there was I think 6 of us that were
6 tourists that they were taking in, and
5, yeah, something I can't remember now, 5 or 6.
yeah, the local Bribri, which is a local name for shaman, Marciliano, he was showing, it was his birthday actually. So they were like, it's a very special day where they're going to show us the sacred place where they do the ceremonies. They're going to show us a plant ceremony with the cocoa, and then there's going to be a party where all the shamans from around the area will come and celebrate with us the next day. We were like, okay, that sounds really amazing. And we drove up there. It was an hour drive, maybe.
Yeah, 45 minutes, something like that.
Exactly. And we went up the mountain, and it was interesting because I mean, I love going nitty-gritty. Like I love getting my hands dirty and being in the mud, So I was super excited when we went up there, and we had to climb a mountain that was completely made out of mud. It had rained beforehand. It was like already beginning rainy season. So Cornelia and I were almost
Sliding down the mountain. I brought way too big of a bag with me because I like to have everything.
so the city girls have their stuff. I had like an entire bag full of beer for the party because the bush doctor said it's his birthday and he likes to drink beer on his birthday, and he's gonna have a lot of friends. So I was like, okay, let's do this. Cornelia had her magic Mary Poppins bag with everything that anybody needs. And we almost slid down the mountain, like trying to get up there, and it was super, super adventurous, right? And by the time we arrived, it was a very traditional way of living, so it wasn't what we were used to, like in the touristic area. And we also saw how the locals were living. This is like into the woods, into the mountain. And yeah, we first didn't understand like what the different buildings were, what it was about. Like there's one building where we had a fireplace where they were cooking, where they were making meals for us, and where they were preparing the cacao. The plants were all around us, so like you could literally just walk a couple of steps and there would be the cacao trees, and we would have the cacao how would you call it, the fruit? I guess.
Yeah, it's a cacao fruit.
Right.
Hmm.
And all kinds of different medicinal plants. And there was this area where we would hang out, but it was just made out of wood planks where we could sit. There was kind of like the atrium hangout area where everybody would come together. And then there was this really, really beautiful, like, I don't think a hut, like a teepee.
You mean for the ceremony?
Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, it was huge. There is a name for it, but I it escapes my mind, but it's like a shala, with the dome that is faced it's a round dome going very, very high up. So that's probably like the most intense thing that they had out of all the other buildings,
Yeah, that
It
it
was
had
really well built.
the most intention and most
Yeah,
energy behind it. And we walked around with a lot of reverence because they said it's a sacred space
right.
where the ceremonies are held. This is where everything is happening. That's where the sacred fire was. And there's this whole ceremony about how to tend to the fire, how to create the sacred space. It took about 2 hours to clear the energy in that space
Yeah.
to go into the cacao ceremony that were being prepared. And it was really, really beautiful because once we landed, they slowly started getting into preparing for the ceremony. And we were asking, so when does the ceremony start? And they're like, this is the ceremony. This is the cacao process takes at least 11 days. So he showed us from the beginning. He took us to the cacao plant and he opened up the plant, the fruit. He made us all try the raw cacao. We were chewing and tasting it, and it was a really, really interesting process. They were showing us how to dry the fruits, the cacao pebbles.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing took like I think 3 hours or something. Like preparing the cacao took 3 hours.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, they were already dried for 11
yeah,
days
yeah.
also, right? So it's a really, really long ceremony. But by the time the cacao beans are dried, it's a huge 3-4 hour process to getting it prepared. So we actually had the cacao in our hands. And they were roasting it and showing us how it was roasted. It was being turned 4 times in this direction, 4 times in that direction, and only 2 guys were able to touch the cacao while it was being prepared, and they were being trained already for months in how it's being done. And it's a very, very sacred ceremony. So Cornelia and I were like mind blown taking videos and pictures.
Yeah.
We got a completely different view on how cacao is made and how sacred it is actually. I mean, we turn around and have these not cacao,
Oh,
chocolate, and we've been craving chocolate like crazy going into it. And then we got to see, oh, like there's this whole process of reverence for the plant and how it is being created and how much intention is being put into it. You were singing and praying into it and creating this really, really beautiful sacred ceremony.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think he was saying during the time, I mean, we unfortunately don't speak Spanish, so we were going off of the translations of the two people that were translating for us. But what the shaman was saying is that this process that he was doing to the cacao, it's been passed on for like thousands of years through the Blueray family lines. So that was like incredible just to be able to experience that. Um, and it was so eye-opening. And like I've sat in cacao ceremonies out in like California and Austin, and it's definitely a different experience than like seeing it being prepared and seeing how many things we take for advantage and not realize like where the source comes from. So I really regained a new like sense of humbleness and respect for the process and just for life in general. Like I think that was extremely eye-opening for me.
And chocolate, how easily
Yeah.
do you just eat chocolate? And there's a whole process. It takes 11, 12 days to even go and sit and drink a cacao, you know what I mean? And what's behind it and who's behind it and how it's done and what a sacred process it is to have the cacao was absolutely mind-bending and mind-blowing. It was
Yeah.
really beautiful. And also being able to immerse in the ceremony. So yeah, once they had the cacao crunched up and made it into little pieces, they cook the cacao and mix it with water and create this brew out of it. And it also took quite some time to prepare that, and about 2 hours to cleanse the space in the shala, in the sacred ceremony space. And yeah, we all were saged and cleansed by the Bri. He had already put on his ceremonial gear with beautiful feathers, and everyone around was kind of holding space, and we were allowed into the space and given very specific places to sit. We couldn't even sit next to each other,
Yeah,
remember?
I was still, honestly, it still blows my mind. Like, I don't know why I got sat across from you because we're like, we want to sit together. He's like, no. And I'm like, why not? He's just, no, you go sit there. So we ended up sitting like directly across from each other, which ended up being like interesting to think about. But yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So they had like very specific ways of going about it. And even when they poured the cacao, it was very specific for people.
Yeah.
You know, this person was supposed to have this cacao, this person was supposed to get this cacao, and we needed to exchange it and then give it back. And there's this whole thing, you know, there's these like really beautiful rituals that would go on until everybody had their cacao, and then he was finally telling us that we could drink. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And the cacao was supposed to be very cleansing. Like it we first of all, we're all going with a personal intention. So during the process and during the ceremony, we could hold a certain body part that we wanted more healing towards. And it could have been purging for some. And personally, I didn't receive, actually I did. I think it came for me later. It came for me like the night after, where I did purge and cleanse. And I do feel like it was helpful on a certain aspect. I mean, you had a little bit of a different experience. We ended up actually sleeping in the shala afterwards, after the ceremony, which
hold on, we're not there
all
yet.
right, fine, you're right. You're right.
Whole thing.
You're right. Continue.
Yeah.
I don't like to tell stories in the linear process. I just jump around. So you go, you tell the story.
So we had so once everybody sat down and had their cacao in their hands, we were not allowed to put it on the ground. So we had to fully drink the cacao until we were able to put the coconut cups onto the ground. And yeah, and then slowly everybody started getting up, and he held the ceremony. He held a speech about what the cacao is about, what their lifestyle is about, what their traditions are about, what their ancestors are about, and how he is welcoming us into this space, and like really, really enjoying being able to share their traditions with us. And there were different people that would come up and talk. And there was a second guy who was like very deeply explaining on what the traditions are. But again, we didn't speak very good Spanish, so we got bits and pieces of people who were able to translate. But I think next time it would definitely be better with someone who is like an actual translator and focus on translating, because everybody was in awe, you know, they're just like, forget about translating for us. But the bits and pieces that we received, as well as energy over there, was incredibly beautiful. And finally, we did get up and we started dancing and moving around, and it was like a communal experience until we all settled down again. And the Bri was singing, and what was he doing? He was singing and doing.
I just remember, are you talking about when we were walking around the circle?
He said,
I think they were probably shaking, so like they were cleansing it with their instruments, I think.
yeah, that's true. They were using sound as
And we
well.
were saying certain things and repeating after him. And then we're walking in a certain direction, I remember. Yeah.
Yeah, we walked counterclockwise, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were walking clockwise. Is that how the clock goes?
Clockwise.
Okay, it's counterclockwise. Yeah.
Counterclockwise, and then eventually we all settled down and we were all singing and dancing and sharing our own songs, and like everyone was included to participate. And yeah, I think we went until like 2 a.m.
Yeah, I think like one or something like that. I remember like when I was sitting then and like really trying to connect with spirit, I felt it with like I think that's when I was doing a lot of crying. I remember just sitting there and like my eyes were bawling, but it wasn't from sadness, it was from joy. It was from joy of being able to sit in a place where people connected on the same frequency. At the moment, I think we were all so tuned in together, and just the feeling of being able to all be connected to spirit in a circle with the same purpose, submersed in nature. There was no service there, so nothing was interfering with us. You can hear the jungle in the background and the beautiful music. And these people are so talented in singing and playing their guitar. I adore instruments and listening to that. And like, I just felt so much joy in my heart that I was crying from joy. And I just thought that was so beautiful. And all I could like think at that moment is how grateful I was for everything in that present moment, because um I couldn't even think about the past or the future. I just was thinking about the now.
You were in the present.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, after that, after sitting together and sharing, we got some herbal wine, I think,
Yeah.
that the bush doctor himself was making for the ceremony, and we drank a bunch of it, and it was all supposed to be purging. So everyone who drank the cacao as well as the herbal wine, which was like a kombucha, it wasn't very strong in terms of alcohol or anything, but it was definitely meant to cleanse. And I was already pretty anticipating a purge. But once everybody went to sleep and we all slept in the shala in the ceremony space, and he was saying that by the morning time, all the things that we decided to release would leave with the first sunlight. And yeah, everybody, man, woman, child, dog, everybody slept in this huge ceremony space, and the fire was tended to. And yeah, that's when my journey began. Oh, I purged. I was probably the only one that purged. I was anticipating a purge, but I haven't had a purge like that ever. It was really, really, really strong, and I thought it is part of my cleansing process, and that it would end in the morning, but it never did. It just gotten worse and worse. So I ended up going to the restroom, and the restroom was in the middle of the woods, and I would get lost all the time. Like my stomach was moving. I almost wanted to throw up, and it got stronger and stronger. And I sat in ayahuasca before, I know purging. I'm almost professional in purging. Like I know when and how and so on. But this was like a whole different level of purging. So I would get lost in the woods. I was like panicking a little bit. There were these ants everywhere. I couldn't see anything. Like it was pretty intense. And I would sit by the fire and kind of uh, gather my thoughts and gather my wits again, and then when go back to sleep. And every time I would lay down, I would cramp up again. Like my solar plexus area, my stomach area would just cramp up like crazy over and over again. And eventually the sunlight came, and I was able to sleep once everybody was out of the shala. But it took me a really, really, really long time to gather my wits. It took maybe, what time did we leave? Maybe 11 o'clock or something.
Yeah, because I think I woke up with the sunrise and then I realized that she wasn't better. And then I was like, I got scared because you weren't looking good, and you weren't getting any better. And so yeah, I think you fell asleep. That's true. When everyone else left around like 8, and then they were trying to cleanse the shala. So I think they made everyone leave the shala around like 10, and we decided to head out and not stay for the second day because Moon wasn't feeling good. I was just exhausted. Like I can't another day, but yeah.
We're usually told that we should be up there for like a night, right? Like there's going to
Yeah.
be an event the next day, but we would come back the next day. But then when we first arrived, they told us there's a second day and there's going to be a second night with ceremony and so on, and we should stay for that one too. And we were contemplating of doing that, but by the time, you know, the next morning we were so out of it, and especially I. And Cornelia was also not really necessarily feeling the energy afterwards. So we ended up leaving. And by the time I got back, I was able to connect with the Mongolian healer, and she looked at me and was able to help my stomach. And she saw the water that I was drinking. And she said the water is incredibly contaminated. And the bush doctor actually told us it's clean and pristine water from the mountains. And coming from Austria, clean and pristine water from the mountains is a good thing. Somehow I didn't put one and one together, that it was absolutely unfiltered and that I do not have any of the bacteria necessary to be able to handle that water.
Yeah.
I just normally drank the water and got incredible water infection, or how is it called? Like water contamination,
Poisoning.
food poisoning, water poisoning. So instead of the food, it was the water that actually poisoned me. I think the water in the cacao ceremony was already cooked, so it didn't make that much of a difference. But yeah, so there is purging going on. There is energetic purging going on, and there is water contamination going on all together is incredibly exhausting. I purged everything that was in my stomach and got rid of everything, but later on we realized that there might also be another reason why all this happens. Because we started in the morning, we started getting strange feelings in general.
Messages about certain things that transpired, and it
Exactly.
started. I think there was. I don't even know how much detail I want to go into.
Share, because we're here to be authentic, you know, and we're here to share.
I mean, personally, I have a very a big alert when it comes to um I have been told to be also careful in spiritual circles, especially. I think there's a lot of traumatic stories that happen in like ayahuasca ceremonies and women being, you know, sexually assaulted, or um shamanic ceremony. So going in, I already had like my red flag being like, okay, like you know, just kind of on alert, especially because there was about 4 beautiful women there. Um some younger than us. There was a 21-year-old girl there too. Um so just going with that aspect, I had that like protective feeling over us and myself. But I also was trying to not go with my programming and kind of relax myself a little bit. But so during the ceremony, I remember calling in my ancestors and kind of calling in the protective shield around us and everything that was happening, because I still was getting those uncomfortable messages, like I couldn't fully shake it off. And so the morning after, when Moon got sick, the younger girl came up to me, and she actually had mentioned that she needed to use the phone. It was all happening right in front of me. She asked for a phone, and the only phone that I guess had some sort of service was the shaman's phone. And so when she grabbed the shaman's phone, she went to look up for her hotel to give him a call that she wasn't going to make it she was going to stay in the jungle another night. And I guess she pulled up the phone, and there was porn on the phone, on the shaman's phone, that was, you know, transpired. The indigenous that was holding the whole circle. And she was very shook. She sat next to me because I was the first person, and I guess she felt comfortable letting me this know. And I was kind of shook by the whole information as well, because I didn't really expect it. And both of us held it to a higher standard when we in a place of sacredness and purity. We wanted to feel that purity, and with that, we didn't really feel that comfort, and there was a sense of disappointment, but also a sense of realization that no one is perfect and that everyone has its own shadows that we're dealing with, right? I mean, we're not friggin' perfect, like no one is. But I guess in that sacred space, we held it to such a high standard that like we felt a certain part of us feel super disappointed. But that's like the first event that transpired that made us think like, oh, like there's something else that's like not fully right here.
Yeah, there are some strange vibes. Like my personal experience was that the abuelo means grandfather, and we would come to him and sit with him and tell him what are the things that we're working on, what do we need help with. You know, I'm used to that with Mongolian shamans. You know, you go to them and talk to them specifically, and he would have his arm around me, and he would have his arm around Cornelia and everyone who would come and sit with him. He was being very sweet. So we thought it was like an abuelo grandfather thing, shaman thing. He was being kind and sweet with us. But I saw that his wife was not very excited about that. She was in general not excited about us coming to their living space. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe she's just shy. But after, like, you know, certain things, like I saw how disappointed or like distasted she actually was about everything. I was like, okay, maybe there's something going on with abuelo, or something going on over here. So that was my first feeling. And then I mentioned that to Cornelia, I think, like, oh, there was some like strange vibes with the mother. She was like, with the mother, with the wife. She's like, this is what happened about the pornography that was found on his phone. It's like, what? So we were both like, okay, like that's when we started coming down in terms of, okay, something is strange. I also thought it was a little strange that he didn't know what to do when I had the stomach cramps, you know, because if this is the type of cramps that somebody would get from cacao ceremony, which obviously wasn't, because we've done cacao before and cacao is usually pretty harmless. It could have been that. They also, nobody really did know what to do with it, right? So it's like, okay, strange. Knowing from Mongolian shamans, they would have like million and one things to do. Okay, got it. And by the time we came down and started talking to other people, more and more strange stories started coming up in terms of what happened.
Tired.
Yeah, so some others stayed behind for the second night where his birthday was happening and all these people came. And so we only heard these stories afterwards from the girls that were left behind. And it unfortunately got worse. You want to talk about it or should I?
Yeah, I can talk about it. So we had met up with another girl that was there the day after. And she had expressed to us that there was another woman there. She was a visitor, but she was kind of living with them. So she had been coming in and out. She's been there multiple times. We didn't speak too much with her during this story. I personally, like I mentioned, didn't feel the greatest energy from her. So as I was giving everyone hugs, like I didn't feel the need to hug that woman. So maybe something in me was just like knowing. But what had happened is that she actually got sexually assaulted by this woman in the shala while sleeping at nighttime. The woman ended up making a move on her multiple times while this girl said that she was trying to shrug it off and tell her no, and she kept going and not stopping. Unfortunately, I think, or luckily, I think she was able to move out of the situation from what she said. But after expressing the concerns to everyone that was there the morning after, no one did anything and unfortunately laughed at her.
Yeah, so there was quite some gaslighting happening when she spoke out about it in the group.
Yeah.
And thankfully, she herself spoke very well Spanish because she
Yeah.
was in Spain for a while. So she was able to really explain herself, and no one took her seriously, including the guy who led the ceremony, not who led the ceremony, who led the trip up the mountain. So we were very, very shocked because we didn't expect anything like this at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really, really mind blowing. Apart from that, oh yeah, so I think multiple people also made a move on the 21-year-old
Yeah.
here as well.
Yeah. Weird things.
Strange
Yeah.
things, and there were a lot of people from the village who came up, and they were drinking during
Yeah.
day party. I mean, it's one thing to drink alcohol, and to tell you the truth, Mongolian shamans, like I can only, you know, compare it to my culture. Literally, everybody drinks. The
But
spirit.
the thing is, so also it's so cold there, like in Siberia area, it's like it's normal for them to actually drink to like keep their body temperature and like it does certain things. But like not to discredit, like uh, yeah.
Yeah, so I thought it was okay, but it was kind of strange because we would ourselves never do anything like that. Like if we were to have a ceremony, if we were to invite people into a spiritual space, we would never drink, but
Yeah.
explicitly requested for beer, and I gladly obliged. But to hear what happened afterwards in the sacred space, the shala, they were listening to the Travis Scott and playing rap music and getting drunk, and the girls or and guys who stayed for like a spiritual experience were extremely shocked that the shaman party ended up being an actual party.
Yeah.
So
Right.
for us to hear that afterwards, especially after the stomach irritations that I ended up having, we were quite shocked and disappointed. But then on the other hand, we really thought about it critically as well, because it's very sad to see that the spiritual backbone of the country, which are the shamans, who are the traditional keepers of the wisdom and the spiritual health of the community, pretty much have been um, this much corrupted by the West. This much corrupted by the tourists and stuff like that, because they really don't have any defenses against it. They're not used to it. They're living in the mountains and having a very specific lifestyle. And when they start interacting with Western technologies and Western tourism and so on, a lot of contaminations happened that really, really weakened the spiritual backbone. And it was very sad to see that aspect. And we're very, very sure there are other Blueray and other shamans out there that are keeping the traditions in a way that is respectable and that is honorable. And I really inquired about this afterwards, speaking to a professional tour guide of Costa Rica, and he himself is an indigenous and really leads indigenous tours. And I asked him about that, and he said that particular Blueray is known to him as well as to others to go overboard. He has also impregnated tourists, and he is in general out about like this, but it's very, very hard to contain that because it's not as regulated as he wished it would be. But that there are people out there that are really, really sticking to their traditions and holding that spiritual fire alive, but they are far more inland. So he said to get to them, which we would probably love to do in the future with the tour guide that we ended up finding, we would have to travel 2 days, like hike 2 days inland to be able to really, really get
Got
to
it. Makes sense. Not just a 10-minute hike. Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah,
yeah.
no, not to discredit. I know there is indigenous that are definitely pure, but that was our experience. And I think that it's good that we're being authentic and outspoken because these things do happen. And luckily we were guided by your guides to leave that day. That's what I personally really truly believe. Um, and we had both learned to
The
like
extreme purging and the stomach situation was
yeah.
keeping up all night. which I was, I'm the eldest over there, so I was holding this space even though in pain and in struggle. But I was sitting by the fire and I was having an eye and everything. And then the next day we left. So me and Cornelia, we both didn't experience anything of the kind apart from,
Yeah.
stomach issues. And we had this beautiful cacao ceremony experience, which we obviously explained in much reverence and appreciation. But there was also shadow state aspects that we didn't participate on, or we're not part of, that were drawn to our attention. So we were able to see the positive as well as the negative aspect.
Yeah, I still love Costa Rica or love Costa Rica. But it was definitely an experience. And I think it was a huge lesson to even my personally, like I had so many red flags and like I was seeing them and I wasn't speaking about them. And interestingly enough, I think that's maybe why I hurt my jaw, because the day after when I fell asleep, I actually ended up hurting my jaw and it still hurt because I fell asleep wrongly. But like if I spoke and I was like, hey, I feel this is off. Hey, like speaking up about it, now we're learning how our guides are sending our messages and to actually like act on it. Because I should have spoke up when I was feeling things were off already on the beginning, or when I was reading someone's energy and it wasn't feeling completely pure to me. And trusting that inside of us.
Exactly. Like our conclusion really is that a huge part and a huge lesson of this trip is to learn to listen to our intuition. And it literally happened to me even before Cornelia came when I was in the Nosara side. I took two books with me. One of them was about abundance, and the other book was about cracking the codes cracking the codes of reality through numerology and whatnot. And I was working with that book, with the numerology book first, and I didn't listen to my intuition, even though I felt it. I felt it deep down inside that this book was not doing good for me, and my guides ended up warning me by, dropping my laptop on my foot, and I literally broke my bone on my foot for the
You did. And it looks painful.
so painful. And like I have this huge bump on my foot now, and it took me over a week to recover, and I was stuck at the hostel for like an entire week. But I didn't listen to my intuition. And even while we were sitting in ceremony, I had some intuitive ideas about the shaman, but I didn't want to be ungrateful and judgmental, but my intuition was already telling me that there was something wrong. I didn't listen. And every time I don't listen about certain intuitions and don't act on it, something very drastic happens to my physical body. And my Saturn, which is in the sixth house, ran through Costa Rica. So this is just physically, I would get impacted by not listening to intuition. So we learned very, very strong and drastic lessons
Yeah.
to learn to listen to our intuition and our guidance ahead of time before we encounter stronger, more physical resistance in the real world.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was
That's for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I mean, we'll be back again with more insight and on our journey.
there's definitely a lot more to digest because we did a lot of personal healing that we want to get into. We also tapped into the topic of abundance and give and take and unconditional love that we want to get into next time. So stay tuned. If you
Exactly.
have any more questions about anything that we discussed and talked about and want to hear more about it, please text us in the comments, DM us in our Instagram at Blueray Collective. And of course, we have an email at blueraycollective@gmail.com. And please reach out. We're really, really open to interacting with you guys. So have a good
Yeah. Yeah.